Hello, my name is Lauren Rosenfeld. I'm a natural science illustrator and conceptual artist based out of Norman. Today I'm speaking with Katie Gillies, the Director of Conservation for the Oklahoma Nature Conservancy working out of Tulsa. We are going to discuss conservation priorities in Oklahoma. Thanks so much for being with us today, Katie.
Thanks for having me.
So my first question for you today is if you can share what the importance is of conserving native ecosystems and habitats and why the public should want to become stewards of the land.
There are so many reasons to conserve our native ecosystems, but I'll touch on just three for this response. And the first is that it took millennia for these native habitats to develop and evolve. They are intricate and complicated and diverse, and we don't even fully understand them yet. So conserving them allows us to retain them so that we can learn what's out there and how all the pieces work together ecologically. Second, it's good economics, good for our financial bottom line to have a healthy, well-functioning ecosystem that provides us with clean air and clean water and a place to recreate and a place to grow healthy food. A non-native ecosystem that is unbalanced, it's expensive to manage and to restore. And third, it creates resilience in the face of climate uncertainty. A healthy native ecosystem can provide the resources that plants and wildlife need to handle and better adapt to this changing climate. Additionally, things like green infrastructure, such as intact floodplains, they help protect our communities and people to be resilient to events such as intense rain and flooding. And so that protects our families and our homes.
So Oklahoma has a particularly diverse range of ecoregions. However, it is predominantly grasslands. Could you tell us why native grasslands, i.e. prairies, are important and how individuals and communities can help to preserve these for the sake of human health as well as biodiversity?
Yeah, native prairies are a very special landscape. So grasslands develop primarily because of rainfall. If you have too much rain, you have a forest. If you have too little rain, you have a desert. But if you have just the right amount of rain, you get grasslands, and that's what we've got here. Grasslands are incredibly diverse. They've got birds and mammals and snakes and frogs and bees and butterflies and beetles and more are all found in our grasslands. And some species like the lesser prairie chicken rely wholly on those open grasslands for their existence. Prairies are also super important for carbon sequestration. We all know that trees store carbon and that deforestation contributes to greenhouse gas emission because when you cut those trees, they release all that stored carbon. But grasses store a lot of carbon too. And when grasses are cut or burned or grazed, they don't release that carbon because that carbon is stored in their roots. So prairies can play a very important role in carbon sequestration as well. There are several things that people can do to conserve our native prairies. The first is if you are a landowner, I would ask that you use prescribed fire to manage your trees and shrubs so that the grass can grow and it doesn't get overgrown with woody invasion. Second, you can keep your native prairie native. Don't remove it and convert it to non-native grasses like Johnson grass. Third, I would say graze it or mow it just a few times a year so that the grass and the flowers can go to seed, providing food for birds and pollinators and a seed source for the next year.
What are the current threats our grasslands are facing?
Yeah, grasslands, they are facing a lot of threats. You know, historically, it was conversion to things like crops and non-native grass, and that threat still exists today. But there's also other threats like development from, urban sprawl and housing. Wind energy development is also a threat in our prairie landscapes, and simple fragmentation through roads and transmission lines and things like that that cut through our landscape at a linear level. And of course, woody invasion. So the lack of fire in our landscape is really changing our grasslands.
The Nature Conservancy generally works with private landowners in rural areas due to the scale of preservation that is achieved. What can people in more suburban or urban areas do to make a positive impact in their surrounding environment?
Yeah, I think people in urban and suburban areas, they have the power of choice where that may not exist in more rural areas. So every choice that a person makes can impact their surrounding ecosystem. So I would say they have the choice to choose a small vehicle or even walk or bike. I biked to lunch today instead of driving. You can choose a small house to reduce your carbon footprint. You can choose to recycle and to purchase products that have little or no packaging. You can choose to remove your lawn and install native gardens with native plants. You can choose to support organizations like the Nature Conservancy that conserve our wild places. And you can choose representatives that support and value conservation priorities. And then, of course, you can choose to teach your friends and your neighbors and your family about these important issues. So I would say our urban and suburban residents, they have the power of choice.
What are some positive initiatives the Nature Conservancy is currently implementing within Oklahoma?
We've got a lot of cool things going on in Oklahoma, and I will talk about just two that I think folks may be interested in. So we work on several different projects with numerous different conservation partners, and two products that folks may be interested in include our Site Wind Right tool and our Resilient and Connected Landscape tool. So you heard me say a minute ago that wind development can be detrimental to grasslands. Well, we have developed a mapping tool that identifies low impact areas for wind energy development. So wind energy is great in a lot of ways. It is a low emissions option, but it still has an environmental cost. Every form of energy development has an environmental cost, and wind energy is no different. So what Site Wind Right allows developers or private landowners or resource managers or the public to learn about is places where we can install wind energy with little to no impact to wildlife and habitat. So that is a win-win. And then the other product that I would say folks might be interested in is our Resilient and Connected Landscape. This is another mapping tool that identifies areas where we expect habitat to be resilient in the face of climate change. Not every place is likely to be resilient. And so these areas of high resiliency are places where we, TNC, would like to see some focused conservations with our partners as well as within our own organization. So here in Oklahoma, those places of high resiliency include the Flint Hills or the Arbuckle Plains or the Pack Saddle area out west. So we've got some places we'd like to see protected going forward.
Healthy communities are important, though few may not be aware of how much our surrounding environments play into our health. What are some ways the public can help Oklahoma progress in preserving our natural ecosystems and be more conscious in our development in order to maintain a healthful space for both humans and wildlife?
Yeah, Lauren. So people in nature can both benefit from thoughtful development. So Oklahomans, they can advocate for that thoughtful development, such as the use of the Site Wind Right tool for wind energy development in their state. But Oklahomans can also do things like support our existing public lands by talking to their legislators about how they value state parks or state wildlife management areas or our national forests, or even our city and county park systems, so that we can ensure that they are well funded and managed, and that we have more places set aside for both people and nature.
Ecosystem preservation and human development seem like two different topics. Would you agree that there does not have to be a compromise when it comes to these topics? And if so, what are some solutions you would like to bring about that relates to this?
Oh, I totally agree. People and nature can thrive together, and pitting them against each other is a false dichotomy. People cannot exist without nature. So a good example of a solution is through green infrastructure, or what the Nature Conservancy likes to call natural climate solutions. And so this is where we manage nature to handle some of the problems that people have created. For example, instead of building a housing development or a shopping district in an area that is prone to flooding, set it aside as green space so that when it does flood, inevitably, it doesn't damage property and lives. Instead, it's managed by the natural infrastructure within that floodplain.
Are any other points that you would like to bring about to the public's attention in regards to conservation?
Of course, I encourage everyone to become a member of the Nature Conservancy because membership helps support the work that we do here in Oklahoma and around the globe. So further, it connects individuals with information and calls to action. It connects with our social media and events that the public may be interested in attending related to our conservation work here in Oklahoma.
Yeah, we'll all have to join. So that's all the questions that I have for you today. Thank you so much for all of this valuable information.
Thank you for having me.